Okay. Did you hear that recording in progress?
Yes.
Yes.
Hear that too? Okay. All
We
right.
do.
Today's, yeah, this is our fifth and final session, and we'll try to tie some ribbons around this. This is rather interesting. God uses those who we least expect. Two kingdoms, and I don't really mean two kingdoms in the way that Martin Luther talked about two kingdoms. I'm using two kingdoms in the sense that all of us during our lives, we literally have one foot in the kingdom of God. I may have mentioned this before, I'm not sure, but we literally have one foot in the kingdom of God, in, not of. I think St. Paul talked about that, being in and not of the world. And the other foot's in the world. The other foot is doing what we need to do to survive in the world. And so one foot is our spiritual foot, our spiritual side, and our kingdom side. And the other foot is that foot that, using liturgy, the cross again, that other foot, that vertical side, or I'm sorry, that horizontal side is that foot that, I call it a consolidative phase of our lives where we grow up, we go to school, we graduate from school, we get a job, or we go in the military. We talked about that a little bit last week with our faith development stuff. But then we may marry, we may not get married, but we get a job, a profession of some kind, and we may have children, we may not have children, but if we do, we raise those children, and we have to provide food and clothing and shelter, and literally we slide into home plate head first every day, doing the things that we need to do, and I call that the more consolidative phase of life. And then maybe at 50 or 60, we reach a more generative phase where we decide we want to give back because we've been so taken up with just getting through life, making it in the world. And so the best example of that is, having a grandchild and falling in love all over again because you have a grandchild, and maybe more than one grandchild. I have 11. And so we reach that more generative phase. Maybe we have more time to volunteer. Maybe we have time to get in a diaconia class, and we have more time to serve in a volunteer organization or the church, and that's a more generative phase. So we'll talk more about that in a little while. So that's what I mean by we kind of live in two kingdoms. And so the examples I used in the video, of course, the most obvious one in the Bible is Cyrus of Persia, and he practiced Zoroastrianism, which was kind of worshiping the sun, and but it was rather a moral, ethical religion too. There were some commonalities between Judaism and Zoroastrianism as far as the ethical side went. Remember, it was a king of Persia who allowed Nehemiah, the cupbearer, to leave Persia and go to Jerusalem and help with rebuilding the wall. And most of you mentioned that in your Old Testament papers, which is really, really pretty cool. I know some of you did, and maybe all of you did. The king of Persia, during that time, there was a lot of time when the king of Persia was somewhat progressive, except when you look at the Esther story, it was a little bit different with the Esther story, and that's another story that we could talk about, but it's really not part of our theme for today. I also use Simon of Cyrene. I kind of Simon of Cyrene, we think was from northern Africa. I think he was probably tall. He stood out, and that's why he was chosen by the Roman soldiers to help carry Jesus' cross. He was from the country. He probably wasn't formally educated, not that he was not smart or intelligent, but he was used by Roman soldiers, and he was a very unlikely candidate to be used. As the theme goes today, God uses those who we least expect. I did some research on him a while back for a homily I was doing, and holy smokes, it turns out that there's very good evidence that Simon of Cyrene actually became a bishop in the early church, which I thought was kind of exciting, because God used him, after he carried that cross. The carrying the cross changed his life, if you will. And then the centurion who said, truly, he was a good man, truly, he was the Son of God. And as I said in the video, he was a God-fearer. And and remember the God-fearer that let's see, the God-fearer in the Bible and in the Gospel, who literally he was a Roman centurion. Remember, and he built the synagogue in
Jairus.
Pardon?
Jairus.
Say that again.
Jairus. Are you talking about Jairus?
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with his name, but he built the synagogue in the town in northern north of the Sea of Galilee, and he was a God-fearer, and obviously I think the most famous God-fearer is Cornelius in Acts 10, who wants Saint Peter to come to his house to learn more about following the new way. He wants to learn more about Jesus. And of course, remember, St. Peter doesn't want to go. And then he has this dream with all his food falling down. And the Lord says it's okay to eat what you want to eat when you go into Cornelius's house, because he really shouldn't have went in that house because of the food laws and so forth. So anyways, St. Peter ends up baptizing everybody in the house. And that's why he gets called the Synod Office. He's going to get punished. He gets called to Jerusalem. And then they work it out. They work it out that you don't have to be a Jew, a Hebrew, a Jewish person before you can become a Christian. Judaizers were those who had to obey food laws and had to become circumcised in order to become Christians. And it was largely that event, Peter and Cornelius, that changed that. St. Peter went to Jerusalem, and they said, well, okay, you can become a Christian without obeying food laws, et cetera, et cetera. So those were God-fearers. God-fear was a Gentile who really respected the Hebrew religion, the Jewish religion, because of its ethics and morality. But they could not become Jewish because they feared the knife and they thought the food laws were silly. So when that happened, that's why St. Paul was able to be a missionary to the world. He went to Asia Minor and all those places, and was able to start all of those house churches, many house churches, and people began to become followers of the way, and then later on Christians. Very, very exciting. So God uses those who we least expect. God-fearers, Cornelius, and others. Joseph of Arimathea was another person. He was Jewish, but remember Joseph of Arimathea was a member of the Sanhedrin. He was a member of the 70 in Jerusalem. He was a member of the establishment. He was an establishment person that actually gave Jesus his tomb, which would have been the cost of a house. So imagine what you paid for your house, what your house costs. And in those days, everything is relative. Right? So he gifted Jesus his tomb, so they had a place to put his body. And again, God uses those who we least expect. We would least expect a member of the establishment like Joseph of Arimathea, or Nicodemus was another one. John 3, remember, being born again. They were both members of the Sanhedrin, the Committee of 70, and they were least expected to be used, and especially Joseph of Arimathea.
What, Pastor Chair, one term you did not use yet, but I think sums up the classification for all of those, be they Roman citizens or Jewish hierarchy. In all those cases, they were risk takers. They had a chance, they had the possibility of alienating their own. Now, I should even say St. Peter also was a risk taker, but like you said, when he went to Cornelius's house. But if they mitigated the issue with the food laws and the circumcision part, that sort of negated that kind of thing. But for all the others you mentioned, they all took a certain amount of risk of being exiled, alienated from the Sanhedrin or whatever. And I think that's a very big deal when you come to the point of asking why God uses people you would least expect, especially those who are willing to take big risk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The town I was trying to think of in the north of the Sea of Galilee was Capernaum. Capernaum was where Jesus actually launched his ministry. That's where he calls the fishermen. And I think that's the town. I'm pretty sure that's the town where there's a centurion who actually builds a synagogue. He's not Jewish, he's a Gentile. And he builds a synagogue for the community because he is a God-fearer. Again, God uses those we least expect. I want to share one of my experiences. I'm gonna read this account fairly. I'll skip over some spots, but one day, let's see. This is about a guy in one of my congregations. His name is Melvin, and his name really is Melvin Daniels. Melvin was a farmer, a 10-year dry alcoholic, and even though he knew the Bible well, could quote it readily, he figured he could manage on his own. He licked alcoholism by himself. He farmed the land by himself, and by golly, didn't need any crutch, especially God. Melvin was a weed through and through, but I never did give up on him. Regularly, I visited with him, and the way he quoted scripture, I must admit, I would even learn from him occasionally. Learned from him a lot. One day, while away on vacation, I received a phone call. The on-call pastor on the other end of the line told me that Melvin's 7-year-old son, Laryl, was dead. He had suddenly died the evening before of spinal meningitis. In other words, a tiny speck of dangerous bacteria had gotten into his brain and ended his life. Normally, the on-call pastor would have taken care of this grave situation, but he told me that Melvin wanted and needed me there. So I immediately left my wife and 2 children and that night and drove 250 miles northward to my parish. I ministered to this grief-ridden family as well as I could, resuming my vacation subsequently. I mean, I can't describe how glad Melvin was to see me. It was surreal. It was just surreal because we had this funny relationship. I called on him regularly, but he was dead in the tracks. I mean, he was so committed to his agnosticism that it was weird. So arriving back home from holiday, I realized my first Sunday back at worship, something obviously different. The issue was not who wasn't there in the pews, but who was there present before me. Yes, there at Melvin and his entire family, now of 6 instead of 7. I remembered that just 2 weeks ago, his family had numbered 7. The thought saddened me, and then I thought about the weed. The few remaining weeks of my ministry in that place, I continued to listen to Melvin pour out his grief as well as his tears, assuring and reassuring him that God was not a sadistic causing his son's death because he never went to church. That people die. We are dying right now, moving toward our end in the valley of the shadow of death, and how grossly devastating it is when a son or daughter precedes us in death. I received and prayerfully accepted another call shortly after that, and time passed, lots of time passed. And for the first time in 15 years, I went back to that first parish last autumn. I visited the church building and its pastor, pleasantly surprised with their recent new addition. They were alive and growing. And as I walked into the church sanctuary, I saw a man, his back turned to me, setting the altar for Holy Communion the next morning. The man turned, saw me, and approached, his eyes burning red with the fire of love. Silence filled the place. He finally spoke, a still small voice. Pastor, you buried my son, Laryl, 15 years ago. Do you remember? I haven't missed a Sunday since that fateful day. Thank you for all you did for me and my family. I don't even remember what I said to him. I babbled something in the midst of the emotion, and we parted brothers in Christ. A weed? I asked myself again, no. I said to myself, a very strong stalk of wheat. Anyway, Melvin, as far as I was concerned, God was never going to use Melvin Daniels. And see, because of the grace of God, he used him. The sad thing about that story, though, is that his son Laryl died of spinal meningitis. And that's such a sad thing. God's redemption is alive and well in every situation, you know. I believe that God didn't take Laryl's life, the son's life, in order to get Daniel or Melvin Daniels active in the church, but that's just the way it went. That's the way it went, and I never ever thought that he would ever become active in the church, and he was the least expected person to ever become involved, and he became extremely involved. Let me see if I can. Let's see. I got to manipulate something here. I have my wife's cousin. In fact, she's over there visiting with him now. His wife. I want to talk about a fellow by the name of Paul Lisco. Paul is my age and my wife Susan's age, and he eventually married Susan's cousin, Terry. Paul went to school at one of the Catholic high schools in Youngstown. I think it was Cardinal Mooney. Played football. He was a wonderful football player. And then he went to Youngstown State University and majored in psychology and business, I believe. And in those days, we all graduated from high school in around 66 or so. And in those days, if you lived in Youngstown, you could make way more money working in the mill than you could in most professions. And a lot of professions, and especially you had a degree in psychology. Well, you really have to have a master's, and he didn't know what he was going to do with his business degree, so he just went to work in the mill. Well, if you're familiar with that area, in 1983, the steel mills in the Steel Valley from Pittsburgh to Youngstown went down. They closed, many of them. The mills that actually survived in those days were the specialty steel mills, but all the normal mills pretty much went down. and all these people were out of work, and all of these men didn't know what to do, and many of these men started to drink because they thought that their mills were going to open again, you see, and so their wives went to work, and it was a mess, it's just a mess for a long time. Paul, he was totally desperate. He didn't know what he was going to do. He didn't know, what he should do, and he was always rather religious, and I think even as a young man he thought about, well, maybe I should have a vocation in the church. He was raised Catholic, went to Catholic church, and so on and so forth. And I think he thought about it, but he ended up marrying his high school sweetheart, Terry. She went to a different school. At that time, I think Cardinal Mooney High School was all young men. But they were desperate, food stamps and any kind of help network, help net. He stopped driving his car because it used fuel, and they struggled, and they struggled for a year or so, and then he came kind of to his senses, and he said, I think through all of this, God is calling me. And I think God is calling me to a vocation in the ministry, in the church. And he had suffered greatly, and he was surviving because he had a good family. Terry was just an angel, and he had, by that time, at least 3 children. And so he went to the seminary and studied, and eventually became the full-time chaplain at Northside, I think it was Northside Hospital in Youngstown, and became a deacon in the Roman Catholic Church. And here's a guy who was least expected to be used by God. He was kind of a man's man, and lived a pretty rough life, lived a mill life, and even though he had gone to the university a while back, but it's kind of a story that it's a true story, and it's kind of an event that I always think about when I'm thinking about God uses those who we least expect. He had always lived with one foot in the kingdom, always believed in God, always lived with the other foot in the world, but I think his one foot planted in the world was planted more firmly than the other one, and he felt finally that literally Moses had threw a mantle over him, like Elisha, that story, and he felt that the mantle was thrown over him, and that finally he decided, well, I need to go back to school, and God has used him. We're the same age, and he retired from chaplaincy at the hospital 2 or 3 years ago, but he's still very active as a deacon at St. George Roman Catholic Church in Boardman, Ohio. Any of you have ever been to Boardman, Ohio? It's near Youngstown. And whenever we're there, we go to mass and see him, and sometimes he preaches, and sometimes he does this or that, but most of what he does as a deacon there is teach. He teaches all kinds of classes there. And then to tie a ribbon around this, let's see if I'm going to move this over a little bit. Oh, maybe I can't. Okay, there I can. You can still see me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to see if I can pull this up here. This is sort of, can you see me? You probably can't see me.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, good.
Can't see.
I'm going to read this because this is a little story that Fred Craddock told a while back. Fred is deceased now, but I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Fred Craddock. He was a pastor and taught at seminary for, I think, the Church of Christ. Phenomenal homilist, just really, really good. Anyway, he told this story, and I like the story. So here's the way it goes. He says, my wife and I, we were on vacation some years ago in the Smoky Mountains. No kids with us. We were kind of celebrating a second honeymoon. Well, one day we stopped the Black Bear Inn to eat. Again, this is in the Smoky Mountains. The restaurant had huge glass windows that overlooked the beautiful mountains, and of course, they also had a huge menu. While we were trying to find the hamburgers on that gargantuan menu, an old man walked up to our table. Good evening, he said. Good evening, my wife and I responded. Y'all on vacation, he asked. Yes, sir, I said. Having a good time, he asked. Well, we were, I thought to myself. Yes, sir, we're having a mighty fine time, I said. You going to be here long? The old man asked. Not very long, I thought to myself. No, we won't be here but a week, I said to him. Well, I hope you have a good time, he replied. What do you do? He continued. That's none of his business, I thought to myself. Oh, we're on vacation, my wife and I. We got rid of the kids. I'm going to get rid of this man too, I thought to myself. I said, well, I'm a pastor of a church and I teach at the seminary too. Oh, you a preacher? He asked. Well, yeah, I replied. He pulled a chair out and sat on it backwards with his arms folded across the back of the chair. He said, I want to tell you a story. I said, well, have a seat at our table here. He said, I was born back here in these mountains. My mother was not married, and in those days, such shame. And when we went to town, the other women looked at her and looked at me, and I began to guess who I was and who my father was, and the reproach that was heard fell upon me. And it was painful. And at school, the children had a name for me. I hid in the bushes at recess. I ate my lunch alone. He continued. I started going to a little church back there. He pointed out through the large glass windows of the restaurant toward a mountain valley called Laurel Springs Church. Now, there was a preacher there, a cranky, rough preacher by the name of Prince Albert Colt. Big voice. He scared me half to death, but fascinated me too. I would go just for the sermon. I was afraid somebody would speak to me in the earlier part of the service and say, what's a boy like you doing at church? So I would come late and leave early. One Sunday after I had been going for some time, he said, for some reason I didn't know the people queued up in the aisle earlier than usual, and I could not rush out as I usually did. I couldn't get by, and I began to chill, to panic. Oh, somebody will say something to me, and I needed to get out of there. He said, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I looked out of the corner of my eye, and it was that preacher. And I saw his beard, and I saw that face, and I thought, oh no. The preacher looked at me and said, well, boy, you're a child of God. I see a striking resemblance. He swatted me in the bottom and said, now go claim your inheritance. And I said to the old man, what's your name? He said, Ben Hooper. And I whispered softly to myself, Ben Hooper. Oh yeah. I remember my father telling me about the people of Tennessee twice electing an illegitimate governor named Ben Hooper. He said, I was born that day. He told me a story. No. He told me the story. And see, God, let me pull this back over again. God used this guy by the name of Ben Hooper, became twice elected governor of Tennessee, who thought he was damned. He thought he was doomed until this preacher, this old rough preacher, swatted him on the bottom and said, you're a child of God. Now go claim your inheritance. You know, studies show that people are hungry. Just people are hungry for the gospel. People are hungry for grace. One of the problems is that studies also show that most people are a little skeptic when it comes to the church and how the church is going to view them and how the church may judge them. But people are really, really hungry. I can't tell you the number of times that I'm in an airplane, and you know, I always try to hide in an airplane. I try to take my book. I try to take my book. I'll hold up William Bausch here. I'll try to take my book, and you know, and somebody will ask me my name, and we'll introduce ourselves. And what do you do for a living? And then I say I'm a preacher, and they start to talk about God. And they start to talk about their life, and they start to talk about their faith, and they start to talk about their journey, and they start to talk about their pain and their joy, and they want to talk, they want to share. And I suppose many of these people may not be involved in a church community at all. Some of them are, I suppose, but many of them are not. And God uses those people in various ways. So what do you folks have to share today about? I mean, and this is so, like I said in the video, this is so, you know, liturgia. You know, it's this meeting point. You know, and I think in the video I did tell a story about the sewing machine, right? I took
The bobbin, yeah.
my Susan sewing machine, and you know, when I always saw my mother sew by hand, and there was always just one thread, and then, but she sewed with the machine, and every once in a while she said, I have to rewind the bobbin, and I had this idea that there was two threads, and so I took apart Susan's machine. I never did get it back together again, and she didn't sew that much, so. And I saw there's two threads, you know, there's two threads, you know, and there's this vertical thread and there's this horizontal thread, and that's life. Life is liturgy. All of life is liturgy. You know, we have one foot in the kingdom, one foot in the world. God's work, our hands. So what do you have to say? What do you have to share? By the way, before I forget, I've received all of your papers.
Okay.
And John communicated to me about his. And so we're all square. So before I forget, I'll probably start reading them tomorrow, and I'll probably, because I'm traveling, I'll probably read one or two a day. And I will communicate with you after I read them, and you'll hear from me. And so we'll go from there. And then when I'm done reading them, I suppose Michelle usually reminds me I need to send the stuff in to her. You know, I have the form. I don't know if she'll, when she reminds me to do that, I don't know if she'll send me a copy of the form again or not, but she doesn't have to because I have it on my computer. But we'll go from there. So what are your thoughts about God uses those who we least expect? Two kingdoms. What are you thinking?
I have an experience that I think kind of fits this. I was at a conference in St. Pete, and the last morning of this 3-day conference, they had a guest speaker. And on the stage, a spotlight came on, and this man was standing there, and he would walk 8 steps one way, turn around and walk back. He did that several times, and then he introduced himself, and he told this story, and it's a long story, but I'll try to condense it. He was a Lieutenant Colonel Charlie Plum. He flew his last mission off an aircraft carrier and was going to be shipped home from Vietnam after that. Well, he was shot down and was in a POW camp for years. I don't recall exactly how many. But he as most of us know, POWs learn to communicate through various means on tapping and whatever. And there were 16 of these guys in this one cell, if you will. And they, you know, they helped each other. They did what they could, and they learned each other's name, rank, social security number, and home address. And in case one of them got out, the rule was you go to all of our families and tell them where we are, that we're okay, and blah, blah, blah. So long story short, he was beaten. He was the highest ranking POW that they had at that time. You know, they tried to put him on TV to say all these things he shouldn't say about the government and everything. Anyway, he lost his wife, divorced him. He, you know, anything bad that could have happened on top of being shot down in a POW happened to this man. So as the story goes, you know, he finally, the youngest, they were going to release one person, and everybody thought that it should be him. And he said, no, I want the youngest among us to be sent home. He's got the most life to live. And so they sent the youngest guy home, and he provided all this information to all the various families. Finally, of course, the war ended and they were released, but he was, as I said, in terrible shape physically, emotionally, and everything, but he never lost his faith. He taught his other POW friends hymns. They prayed together. They mourned the loss of one of theirs that they did lose from the beatings and so forth. And he got home and got his life back together. He married again, and years passed, and he was in a restaurant and with his wife, and this man came up to him and said, I know you. You're Lieutenant Colonel Charlie Plum. And he said, yes, I am. And he said, I packed your parachute that day. So when you were telling some of the stories that you were telling, Pastor Chip, I thought of the young man that packed his parachute being the one that was the least expected. He actually, in the fact that he packed his parachute, and Lieutenant Colonel Plum survived the being shot down. And yes, he lived a hellish number of years as a POW, but the number of men that he brought to Christ during that time, you know, is pretty astonishing, at least to me. So without the guy that packed his parachute, none of that would have happened.
Yeah, nice, sweet.
Yeah. He does have a book out, and when I got home from that conference, I got the book. It was they looked all over for it, and they finally got it, and it was very difficult to read what those men went through.
Yeah. Indeed.
That's all I got.
That was hard to follow.
It is hard to find. I know, it's kind of, you lose so many pieces of it, but
No, I just meant you gave such an excellent example. I don't know how any rest of us could come up with a better
Yeah, it's a
story.
tough act. Tough act to follow.
come on, dig deep, girls and boys, you got it.
Well, you know what came to my mind is we have all these examples of how God used people you least expect. Why do we expect him not
use
to do
us.
that?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
about
he-
that a lot.
Well,
Or-
yeah,
or- or-
one of the quintessential stories, of course, in the Old Testament, we did the Old Testament together, is Moses. Moses said, "You can't use me, I can't talk.
Mhm.
I'm not a good speaker."
I'm,
He
I'm
says,
gonna throw one
Aaron
out
will
there
speak,
because
Aaron will speak for you.
Mhm.
I'm gonna throw one out there because it's an interesting story about a person who gets called into ministry, a person who you might least expect gets called into ministry. Um, I had a first cousin, he's now deceased, went into the Navy and submarine service, but then came out and did a variety of things, I suppose. He was also kind of musical and the like, but he went off to seminary and became a Baptist pastor, a Baptist preacher. And lo and behold, because of another friend I have, he says to me one day, "Do you know a Carl Baskin?" I said, "Yeah, I have a first cousin by the name of that name." "Well, he's the chaplain at St. Vincent's Catholic Home for Boys." And it just the juxtaposed positions of a Baptist pastor being called to become the chaplain of a Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Yeah, you're laughing, but it's like, how does that happen? And why? But what gift did he bring to that institution that made it so special? And if it wasn't for my other friend who was the administrator of that home and says, "You must know this guy, he has the same last name as you," it's like I couldn't believe it. And then he ultimately passed, but he was very heavy into the Dulcimer Society. The guy was a very talented individual. And I'm going to say, I'm not buttering Pastor Chip up, but all the gifts that you have, there are others out there that have gifts that they come to the table with, and they use them in different ways to proclaim God's message. And I think it's just a wonderful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, interesting.
On that, the question that Kathy said about why people were called and why we are surprised at who God called. Look at the bunch of us. I mean,
Yeah.
really, I mean, did you ever think that this is what you would be doing at this point in your life? I certainly didn't.
No.
But I did know from early on that I was supposed to do something. I just didn't know what it was. But look at us. We're called to do this.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm interested that all of these stories so far, to be called has meant to clergy or related activities. And I would like to suggest that that God calls people to other things too.
Absolutely, they do.
Maybe unexpected. There was a teacher I worked with who his grammar was appalling. He never got through a whole sentence without messing it up somewhere. He was a social studies teacher. He loved to read history. He was a very effective teacher, other than the fact that he murdered the English language every time he opened his mouth. But he was, and he did too. I believe he was called to do that. It was a service to hundreds of, well, more than 100 students every semester. So he affected so many lives over the course of his teaching career. And I would suggest that that was a vocation too. It's not, and I don't mean in any way to run down being called to be clergy. I just want us to broaden the idea, the unexpected. And Bobby was, I would have failed him in 9th grade English, let alone, oh my goodness. He didn't write as badly as he spoke. I guess when he stopped to think as he was writing, he kind of cleaned it up. It was not autocorrect because that didn't exist at the time. That would have been,
Carol, I think that's a given. I mean, the given is that, yes, definitely, we don't have to be called to the ministry. We're all called. We're all asked by God to be involved be his hands in various and sundry ways. And it's, to me, it's wonderful when I talk to somebody who has that concept in whatever he or she does, and you can be a skilled person, an electrician, a plumber, a mason, and an auto mechanic, and just be called to do that work. Way back when there was a can't remember his name now, but he ran a Phillips 66 station right near where I lived, and he was a mechanic too. He and his wife had a garage. It was a mom and pop station. They had a garage and they pumped gas also, and he was technically a member of the church that I was at, but he didn't go to church. But this guy was really called to the work that he did. I mean, fantastically called. It was amazing. He loved what he did, and he loved his customers, and he served his customers, and he went the second mile with his customers, and it was just kind of neat to see that, that he was that kind of person. Just really felt called to do what he did.
We can be called in both kingdoms.
Yes, indeed. Where they go to the order. What are you guys going to do the rest of your summer? Some of you are taking a class, right? All of you?
Yeah, I think we all are.
And go.
Wilma and I are halfway through a class, and then we all pick up Plant the Church next week.
Yeah.
No rest for the wicked, you know.
I knew you were gonna say that, Carol.
That was
Well,
one.
I got an email from Michelle this morning or afternoon. I'm not sure exactly when it came through, and the email said, "Have a good summer. The diaconal committee is off July and August. We're not meeting in July and August." And she did say, but classes are going on. Classes are meeting, but we're not meeting. We're not meeting. Did you get that email?
Yes.
Did you get it too? Okay. All right.
Yes.
She's in the process. I don't know where Michelle lives in Sarasota, Florida, but I know her and her husband are in the process of building a home on the other coast.
Yeah, Palm
Yeah.
Coast,
Palm Coast.
Pardon?
Palm Coast.
What'd you say?
It's
Palm.
South Coast.
Raise your hand.
And I think they're going to be near the Space Coast, aren't they? Maybe somewhere in there.
Yeah.
North of it.
Oh, north. Okay.
Near St. Augustine, up
Oh,
near St.
Augustine.
Augustine.
Okay. All right.
Palm Coast. Palm
Yeah, got it.
Coast.
Got it. And my wife and I, Susan and I,
Michigan,
we
Michigan, the Palm.
we live real close to Anna Maria Island, but it's so close that when we really want to get away and get in the car and go someplace, we always go to Amelia Island. And we really like Amelia Island.
Great.
It's just fun going to the other coast, because we live in the Gulf Coast. So it's fun going to the other coast, and we'll go for a couple nights and see the ocean, which is nice.
Didn't Michelle say she might join us in the next class?
Yes.
Yeah, she's gonna
She's
audit
going to
that
audit.
class.
Yeah, we really miss Michelle in the office. She was just fabulous, and the person who succeeded her is just great too. But I tell you what, Michelle was, she handled call processes, and there's a lot of nerves, with a call committee, and then a call committee will call a pastor, and then that work is shifted back over to the church council and the church council president. And Michelle was just phenomenal. I mean, she would just spoon feed you. She would just tell you exactly what you needed to do. She would send you the forms and how to fill out the forms and what to do, all of this stuff, and how to do the church council meeting when you called a pastor, and what needed to be done and what needed to be filled out. And she was just a gem. And I want you to know that. Maybe you know that already, but she was just phenomenal.
She's the new vice president of the Senate, right? She's taking Cheryl's place, Cheryl Stewart's.
Okay, no, I don't know. Is she? I'm not sure.
I think so.
I think she is, yes.
All right. And
Cheryl,
the reason I don't know that is I was not at the Senate Assembly. I was excused because I had this 50th +2 reunion that I had committed to. I had some things to do there, and it was sort of late coming, the live meeting, and so I had these two commitments, so I went to the one. So there are some things that I don't know, you know.
well, I mean, Cheryl is irreplaceable.
Yeah.
There's nobody gives a report like Cheryl Stewart.
Yeah.
But Michelle she knows what she's doing. She's
Yeah.
familiar with the process and the people, and she'll be good.
Yeah, super organized person, extremely organized and forthright. So, yeah, indeed. Okay, you folks have a great rest of your summer. After this trip, I'm gonna stay home for a while. And be there and grounded at the homestead where we live. And you have a fabulous summer. Do you have any plans you want to share? Anything going on?
Just work.
Okay.
I'm going on a fishing trip in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in August.
You said a fishing trip.
Good.
Yes.
Nice, nice.
Where are
Very
you
good.
gonna be, Peg? Where are you gonna be, Peg?
Big Manistee Lake,
Oh, yeah.
Man,
the largest lake in the Upper Peninsula. It's a
Yep.
thing that my husband's family has done for years. And my stepdaughter invited me to go along, so it will be bittersweet for me, but I'm going to
I
go.
bet.
Sure, sure, yeah.
We really enjoyed the Upper Peninsula. It was very, very nice.
Yes.
It is nice, sure is. When we lived in northwestern Wisconsin, so we didn't have to go through Chicago, when we went back home to Susan's parents in Youngstown, Struthers, we would always try to take that route, you know, the Upper Peninsula and then down. And it's certainly beautiful up there. Yeah.
Well, I used to go as a child up near there when there was no bridge. We'd
Ah.
have to get a car and take the ferry.
Oh, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Okay. The Lord be with you.
And
Also with
And
you.
also
So
with
do
you.
May the Lord bless us and keep us. May the Lord make his face shine on us and be gracious unto us. May the Lord look upon us with favor and give us his peace. And a phenomenal rest of the summer. And grant all of us his grace day by day, moment to moment. God bless you all. And again, have a good summer.
For you as well.
For you as
Thank you.
well.
You too.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
See you
All right.
next
See you,
week.
Next week.
see you all
See y'all
next
next
Tuesday.
week.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Patrick.
All right. Thank you, Pastor.
Thanks.
Right, right. Bye-bye.